So, Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya to you all. Today, we will be discussing a very important aspect of Ambedkar economics, and it's so important a topic to study that you will begin to see how that relates to even today's Indian economy. And uh, I think the most important thing for us is to look at the session from the contemporary point of view. So I prepared a presentation to help us with how we are going to deal with this. So this is the presentation, and no, not this one. Sorry for that. Let me find out the presentation. Where is our presentation? Okay. What is happening? Stop share. Sorry for this. Just give me 1 minute. And share. What happened? Stop sharing. Share. Huh? 1 minute, huh? Some technical issue, but we will resolve it. What is happening? Give me 1 minute, huh? So, uh-huh. Just give me 1 moment, huh? Sorry about this. Ah. Is this screen visible to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
No, sir, not
It is
visible.
visible. It is visible, but it is freezed.
Not visible.
Not visible, sir.
Wait. Now this share is gone or there?
So it's gone.
Okay. Okay. Is it visible now?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
it's visible now.
Okay, great. Great. And okay. Give me 1 moment and we are done. Okay. Okay. So let's begin. Sorry for this technical glitch here. And as you can see that today our session is about Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar on Indian economy, and it's broadly going to cover public finance, fiscal federalism, and democracy as well. But don't get daunted by these technical terms. As we move forward, a lot of things will be clear to us. So just to okay. So you see, as Babasaheb Ambedkar said, that education could rescue our people from the depth. That's what young Babasaheb Ambedkar told to Ramaji, his father. And you are going to see how this education has, helped the community to really, make a dent. So this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar said. And sorry about this technical problem. I was resolving something. So also, similarly, Babasaheb Ambedkar said that higher education has enabled me to reach the high status which I occupy today in the public life of this country. And this is what Babasaheb Ambedkar said in a letter which he wrote to Pratap Singh Bhosle in 1950, where he's categorically mentioning that higher education has enabled him to reach the high status which I occupy today in the public life of India. So you will be very astonished to know that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was already an economist at the age of 26, because one of his documents says that he has already mastered the public finance, and he could lecture on pure theory of economics and public finance, and he could deliver the special courses on economic history of India and Indian finance. Why I put up this slide? In order to demonstrate the fact that at the very young age of 26, Babasaheb Ambedkar was trained as an accomplished economist, which we are going to see in the course of the session today as to how he was a specialist in the public finance. So when we think about Babasaheb Ambedkar, as we know that this aspect of Baba Saheb's intellectual legacy is not being, very much appreciated even in the movement. But if you see that young Babasaheb Ambedkar was like, moving in the economic universe, and you see the names here, like Sidney Webb, he is one of the founders of the London School of Economics, had a direct contact with Babasaheb Ambedkar. Alfred Marshall, we have no evidence whether Babasaheb Ambedkar met this father of a neoclassical economics, but he has written a letter to Seligman, another renowned economist and a teacher of Babasaheb Ambedkar in the Columbia University, to introduce him to all this galaxy of stars, Alfred Marshall. And indeed, Professor Seligman has introduced him to a couple of great economists of the day. And he also said that Alfred Marshall is very old now and he might not be able to see you, but Professor Nicholson might be able to find out a way to meet him. So you see all these great names, even if you Google today, Sidney Webb, Alfred Marshall, Nicholson, Foxwell, Seligman, Professor Cannon, and Sombart and Schumacher. They were the German economists, and in fact, Seligman recommended Babasaheb Ambedkar when he went to Germany to try to meet them, and they are not the only leading economist in Germany. And he said that there are a lot of people in Germany who can teach economics. So that's in 1920s. Are all big names in the field of economics. Particularly, when we study the Buddhist economics, we will be touching some concepts of Schumacher, who wrote a book, Buddhist Economics, in 1977. And so you see, the economic universe of Babasaheb Ambedkar was, studied with the galaxy of the stars in the field of economics. They're all great names, and they have done a lot, great foundational work in economics. Now, young Babasaheb Ambedkar was not just a theoretician, though he has gone into the depth of the economics, and he has mastered almost all the disciplines that were emerging in the field of economics. He was also, a practitioner of economics, and that gets reflected in his letter to Naval Bhatena in 1920, when Naval Bhatena, his very close friend during his Columbia days, who has helped him so much with finance and monetary help. He has written him in a letter that the stock exchange is the most dangerous avenue to getting rich quickly, as is the horse racing. It would be better if you kept yourself aloof from them a little. So, this is advice, but we know that Babasaheb Ambedkar also started a consultancy for the stock market when he came to India for a brief period of time. And he also wanted to invest some money in the foreign exchange because the German currency that time was, not expensive, and he anticipated that it will rise, and he sought loan of about 2,000 Indian rupees from his friend Naval Bhatt. Now we don't know whether he invested in the foreign exchange. But why I am throwing these facts to you, because Babasaheb Ambedkar had a very deep understanding of the economy, of the finance, and he had mastered a lot of disciplines, as we will be seeing in the course of these 6 lectures. So I just wanted to put up to you this very important sort of information, that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar was also making the personal acquaintances with the economist. And in the third session, we are going to see how he criticized the Keynesian economics, the great economists of the time. And also we will be studying about the Beveridge report that became the sort of the base for the welfare state in Britain in 1940s. So this is, I think, a vital information. This is how he kept in touch with his mentor, Professor Seligman, and he helped him a lot in introducing the economist of the day that time. So let's recap a bit, because we are going to look at macroeconomics. And as we have seen from the previous session, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar specialized in economic and financial history and analysis of India. And his analysis is penetrating and insightful to understand Indian economics. His PhD thesis was on public finance, provincial finance, and he was to write on local finance. The scope of his study was macroeconomics, and his another PhD thesis was on problem of rupee, the topic of the third session. So this is just to recap in order to create a base for the lecture today. So the trade, commerce, and government. So this is how Babasaheb Ambedkar connected micro and macroeconomics in terms of the trade, that the trade is an important apparatus in a society. It's very difficult for a society to exist without trading, and trade is based on private property and pursuit of individual gain. That's what he says. And he says that with trade, it would be difficult for its member to distribute the specialized product of their labor. So, the individuals, they create specialized products, like they create the goods and the services, and they exchange. So, without the trade, it would be difficult for the members to distribute the specialized product of their labor. Surely a lottery and an administrative device government would be incompatible with the nature of trade, because it involves the individuals and their creativity, their productivity to create the specialized products. And the lottery or a chance, or even an administrative device like government, wouldn't be compatible with the nature of trade. The only mode for the necessary distribution of the products of separate industry is that of private trading. So he emphasizes on the private trading. In other words, he is talking about the microeconomics here. And he says that the trading society is therefore money-based society, because if you want to exchange these specialized products, you need a medium of exchange, and that is money. You cannot resort to the barter system of trade, where you exchange the products itself, which we are going to cover in the third session. And he says that the money is a pivot on which everything revolves. So in the economics, everything revolves around the money. And he says that a trading society is bound to the function in the regime of price. So the price is all about the microeconomics, the demand and supply, the creation of the products and the services, and all the factors of production, and all these basic sort of the milieu of the microeconomics. So I just put this slide up here to show you that he was not just dealing with the macroeconomics, but he was also very much comfortable with the micro aspect of the economics. And this term micro and macroeconomics became popular after Babasaheb Ambedkar had his degrees in economics. And that will show that he had this thorough grounding in understanding the economics. So just for out of interest, I put this up for some of you to understand. Is Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar invested money in Mr. Varade's business to trade in tobacco from Nipani. So he has given some amount to Mr. Varale, his close friend from Nipani, so that he can trade in tobacco. So trading is a very important aspect. And as Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the society cannot do without trade. He was developing a business project of trading in jute with the Burmese government to finance revival of Buddhism in India. He has a business plan to trade in the jute so that money can be raised and that can serve the cause of revival of Buddhism in India. He had this very interesting idea of a business whose ownership will lie with the workers of the business, and he thought about a mill where ownership will belong to the workers of the mill. And I think this is a very innovative ways of looking at the business as to how the business can be done. And there are models in the world today where the companies are owned by the workers themselves, even in America. So just out of interest, I put this up to whet your appetite of what is going to come. So the topic today is a very interesting topic, and it deals with public finance. And public finance is the very important discipline of economics that deals with macroeconomics, the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, and so on and so forth. When we talk about the microeconomics, we're talking about the supply and demand at a private level. We're not talking about the aggregate demand and aggregate supply, which is the domain of the public finance. So as always, Babasaheb Ambedkar had studied a lot to write on the macroeconomics. He say volumes after volumes. In one of the prefaces of a book on economics, he said he has studied 40 volumes to arrive at one particular part of his thesis. And he has, if you I'm going to show you some of the his books, where you are going to see that the kind of study Babasaheb Ambedkar has done, it's unbelievably broad and deep. So he says that even when the subject is analytical, a good analytical study often requires an historical setting. So study of history is very important. So for those who are interested in economics, it's very important to study the history of the economics, and the ideas in the economics. And we have seen in the first session as to how Babasaheb Ambedkar analyzed the Indian economy in terms of the revenue and expenditure during the British Raj. These two key words, revenue and expenditure, very, very important. We have to understand what is revenue and what is expenditure. So earning and spending, to put it in a very simplistic terms, it's how the government earns and how it spends. Simple and very easy to understand, which is called the revenue and expenditure. So if you look at the balance sheet of on any government account, you will see this revenue side and the expenditure side. And it's not a rocket science to understand what is revenue and expenditure. We earn and we spend. So the government earns through different ways, through taxation, to other receipts, and the government spends the money. And in the session first, we also saw how the East India Company and the British Raj exploited Indians and continue to do so. And this analysis, which is presented in this domain of public finance, which Babasaheb Ambedkar has ventured into, is best after the after the power was transferred from the company to the crown, to the British government itself. And you see, Babasaheb Ambedkar was a very open-minded person, and he was not averse to receiving ideas from any source. And once he referred to Ramai's economics, and according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, she had this insight into economics as to how to manage the family finance. And she says that when they were living a life of poverty, she would have a small bundle where she would put a particular amount of money and make 30 bundles for a month, and she will only spend that bundle of money for the day. She won't spend extra penny on that day. And Babasaheb Ambedkar was amused with this understanding of Ramai as to how she controlled the expenditure so that they can make their both ends meet. So she controlled the expenditure by parceling out a limited sum every day. So I think this is a financial discipline that each one of us can practice. you see, parcel out a particular amount to be spent on every day, and not letting our expenses go beyond or shoot beyond what is what we decided to do. So what is public finance? So public finance is not just about the subject of equity in taxation and economy in expenditure. It is a practical problem to solve as to how to bring equilibrium in budget. This is very important concept, because it's not just about equity in taxation and economy in expenditure, that the government has to have the economy in expenditure. We have to see that every money spent goes to the right cause to serve a particular goal of the country. And the taxation should be done in a way that it should maintain the equity. I think these are very key ideas. But Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the public finance is not just the subject of equity in taxation and economy in expenditure, the two sides of the same things, revenue and expenditure. So he says that it's a practical problem to be solved as to how to bring equilibrium in budget, as to how to match the receipts and expenditure. If expenditure is too much, if the receipts are not, the revenue is not that much, how the country is going to grow, how the country is going to develop. So, it's very important to maintain this equilibrium. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that to find the method of meeting the problem of equilibrium in provincial budget, in any budget, provincial, local, or the national budget, it's a practical task to, bring the equilibrium between the revenue side and the expenditure side. So when he talks about the provincial budget of finance, he's talking in terms of the three stages: assignments, assigned revenues, and shared revenues. So I'm not going to go into the depth of it because you can read it. I just wanted to, bring this information to make us understand what we are going to analyze in the course of our lecture today. So he wrote a thesis on the evolution of the provincial finance in the uh, British government, where he talks about how the various heads created a lot of problems. So, his understanding to study the budget or the finance of the entire country in terms of the union government and in terms of the provinces is very insightful, which is even today we can find a lot of merit in understanding his ideas. So when he's talking about the provincial finance, how the money will be raised and distributed by the provinces, because in the beginning the finance was not the directed at the provinces, and Babasaheb Ambedkar gives a total history, the administrative history of India, the financial or economic history of India, in order to show that how the confusion about um, the budgets and about the revenue sharing led to a lot of financial crisis in the British India. So in his very insightful study, where he talks about the decentralization of the finance, which was in the hands of the central government, and how that created big issues in the economy. So in his very path-breaking study, which his guide says is very important not only for India but for the other countries as well, because other countries are also dealing with how to share the finance from the two entity between the two entities, like the central government and the union government. We sometimes call the fiscal federalism. Like, what is the case of Japan? What is the case of America? What is the case of Switzerland? What is the case of India? What kind of a structure is emerging in terms of the finance between the center and the provinces? So in his study, he has studied the origin of the provincial finance. Very important, insightful study that he has conducted. And he has also studied development of the provincial finance, organization of the provincial finance, and the final form in which it was cast in the constitutional changes of the Government of India Act 1919. So I leave it to you to study that, because I think this is very interesting study. And once we go through this session, you will not find it difficult to dabble with the ideas that are there in his thesis. It's a very interesting thesis. His language is, people think it's difficult, But if we have a little bit of patience, his language is beautiful. He uses literary metaphors. He also uses very strong conceptual idioms. And I think it's very, very interesting if we begin to probe into his economic writings, which I find very interesting. So you see, the British India was not you know a consolidated sort of a territory. And in 1857, such was the case. As you can see, that the Indian kingdoms and the British controlled territories, which was known as the provinces, and there were 11 provinces. In the beginning, there were only three important provinces: the Bengal province, the Bombay province, and the Madras province, which were known as the presidencies. And they had their own systems, and there was no centralized system to work with. And Babasaheb Ambedkar gives the account of how the imperial system of financial of the finance came into being, and how that led to big problems, and how that was solved. So, a brief history of the public finance in India. There was a big problem in terms of the categories, as to what sort of the account is that. An account is a very simple statement of the receipts and the payments, like the revenue side and the expenditure side. And the classification of accounts was very confusing: imperial, provincial, incorporated, local, and excluded local. Baba Ambedkar says that there was a confusion in the categories, totally confused, totally mind-boggling way of categorization. And he shows how the different categories evolved. And he also dabbles with what is called the relationship between the various categories. So why we have to know this aspect of it, because you can see his penetrating mind. As I told you, he has read volumes and volumes of the government reports, the records, the budgets of at least 200 years to frame his argument, to produce the insights. He has read a lot. He has read a lot, and he was writing a lot. He was thinking a lot. He was analyzing a lot, and there was a lot of data he was analyzing. As I will show you in his book as to how much data he was analyzing. So he says that there were two chief sources of information. And they were the annual budget statement, which is known as the annual financial statement, in today's parlance, the budget as we know. And there were annual volumes of finance and revenue. They had a lot of information shared between them, but they were voluminous. And at one point of time, Babasaheb Ambedkar says to find the exact year as to when the decentralization of finance took place in India is very difficult to assert. He says that it's like trying to find out a needle in the haystack. It's so difficult to find information. So, a lot of information is lost in that volumes after volumes of the data that was generated. So, coming to this, according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, there were a few turning points in the history of the public finance in India, which was the imperialism in 1833. All the power was concentrated in the central government. In 1833, a very important year in the economic history of India. That was a time when also the common currency was designated. And then after the mutiny of 1857, what Babasaheb Ambedkar terms as a period of reconstruction which began in 1858, following the mutiny of 1857. A lot of restructuring and reorganization was going on in the British government, in the British Indian government, and in both the sphere, administrative and finance. And there was a tension between the imperialist and the federalist. The federalist is, of course, a term which connotes that the people who believe in the federalism, that the provinces should have their autonomy, the provinces should have their financial autonomy, their administrative autonomy, so on and so forth. So this is a concept which we need to look into, the concept of federalism, which is very, very, very important to understand our country today. And then Babasaheb Ambedkar showed there was a compromise between the imperialists and the federalists, and how the
नाही ते नाही का आंबेडकर
can you
आंबेडकर ना ते इकॉनॉमिक्स मध्ये
can you close your mic?
यायचे लोक आहेत
So compromise between the two views, evolution of provincial finance culminated in 1919, when there was a separate category of the provincial finance, and in 1919 Constitution of India, and we can see the steps towards the fiscal federalism. Now, Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the fiscal policy, what we are dealing now, is a fiscal policy of the British Raj, where he says that it was an unsound fiscal policy. He says that it was not a sound fiscal policy, and he says it is said that in the matter of state economy, it is usually argued that the expenditure to be incurred should determine the magnitude of revenue to be raised. This stock maxim is proved to be ruinous wherever its limitations have failed to receive their due weight. It cannot be said that the growing expenditure of the state can only be sustained from the growing wealth of the society. So he says that there is a correlation between the growing expenditure of the state and the growing wealth of the society. But he says that what is important is, he says, the state of sound finance does not merely consist in being capable of raising the requisite revenue. The mode of raising revenue is of tremendous consequence for the stability and productivity of the nation. Very, very important terms in the economic thinking of Babasaheb Ambedkar, the stability and the productivity of the nation. So very insightful. This was written during the period of, in the decade of 20s, early 20s. This thesis was written in the early 20s. And here Babasaheb Ambedkar is making a very important point of having, the mode of raising revenue. How you raise the revenue is of tremendous consequence. It is not just raising the revenue which is important, but also the mode of raising revenue is of tremendous consequence for the stability and productivity of the nation. And then he says that you cannot diverse the finance and the administration. They should be integrated. If there is a confusion about the how the finance is administered, the kind of the administrative structure that is needed to raise the revenue and expenditure. And there was a lot of confusion, as you can see through his thesis, about who will administer what and who will spend where and what. There was a tremendous confusion, and that led to big problems in the Indian economy. So Babasaheb Ambedkar says that unsound fiscal policy of the Raj has created a lot of problems with the Indian economy. He says that the wealth of the society is the only patrimony on which the state can draw. So the wealth of the society is very important. If there is no, if the state, if the society is not creating the wealth, the government will be bankrupt. So the most important thing is that the society creates the wealth, and therefore Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the productive power of the society is a key. Now, in this single phrase, you can unlock a lot of ideas that if the, for example, the caste system. The caste system is such a heinous form of organizing the society that it makes the society very unproductive. And we can analyze it, we can see it as to how the caste system makes the society very unproductive. So the productive power of the society is a key. So Babasaheb Ambedkar says that if the tax system is, by its unequal incidence, may cause social upheavals. So there has to be the equity in the taxation. Very important point. Very important point for us to think about is to look into as to how the unequal incidence in the tax system can cause social upheavals. And he says, similarly, unwise incidence on trade and industry may impoverish society by setting out of gear its economic mechanism and technique. So he says that the trade and industry must be handled very carefully so that it should not impoverish or beggar the society by setting out of gear its economic mechanism and technique. And he says that beggaring the state by impairing the productive power of society. So when the productive power of the society is impaired, it will make the state very poor, and the poor state cannot grow economically. So Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the policymaker should look beyond the more immediate object of raising and spending money and concentrate on how of the finance. So how the fund is raised, how the money is raised is very important in the scheme of Babasaheb Ambedkar. And he says that the state accounts must have the checks and balance, because when the East India Company started creating the budgets, it was similar to the mercantile accounts, like the business accounts. It has no mechanism of checks and balance. So Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the checks and balance are very important to monitor, to maintain the state accounts. And he says that not just good enough for the mercantile accounts, was useless for the first and the elementary purpose of all good state accounts, namely check. So the check to monitoring it is very important. Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the state accounts, the good state accounts has the checks and balances. And he says that appropriation budget, the term which we have to understand, that the items of the expenditure are already marked and they are very important for the checks and balance. Gautam, can you stop your mic, please? So, the appropriation budget is very important. That was not there in the beginning of the Indian, fiscal policy. And the who will spend where and how they will spend, to on which item the amount will be paid, spent, who will spend, how the amount will be spent, had no bearing on the East India Company. And it created, it led to the inefficient sort of the economy. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that appropriation budget was an important for creating the checks and balance. And he says, if we do not fix up the responsibility, then it's nobody's responsibility. So that was a time when the responsibility was not fixed. So finance, being everybody's business, suffered from being nobody business. So the provinces had their systems, the union government has their system, and therefore it suffered from being nobody's business. So the Babasaheb Ambedkar says that it's not just important to have to augment the resources. That means to have a growth in the resources. He also says that there should be a proper, what he terms as the fiscal system. There should be judicious taxation, and the expenditure should be done in the right manner. So he gives a very good example as to how the funds can be raised without without destroying the wealth of the society. So he says that there is a good example in the farming. Constant cropping without manuring ends in the exhaustion of soil. So if we are trying to just suck the money from the citizens without replenishing it, then it is going to destroy the economy. So it is not just about revenue, it's also nurturing the economy. It's also about how to create the wealth of the society. According to Babasaheb Ambedkar, the initial stages of the Indian economy was dominated by a single tax system, like land taxes. So we have seen that how the 54% of the amount, the funds came from the land taxes. So he says that the single tax system is an unjust, is not a good system. And he says that the tax regime was unjust. It was not, it didn't give justice to the people. Some people were taxes, even the poor were taxed. And, he says that that's a very unsound, unjust tax regime. And he says that if revenue laws are unjust to people, they are harmful to the resource people. So we cannot have the unjust revenue laws or unjust taxation, because it ultimately harms the resource of the people. And he says that the barriers to trade and commerce, the internal customs and the external customs, are injurious to trade and industry, because that time India was divided into a lot of small districts, and there was taxation, internal customs. If the good material or raw material passes from one district to another, there was a taxation, there was a transit duty, and that created a lot of barriers to the trade and commerce. And he says that barriers to trade and commerce, internal customs and external customs, are injurious to trade and industry. And he says that because the whole India territory was divided into small district provinces, and they had their rules, they had their own duties, they had their own system of raising the revenue. The market was fragmented, the market was limited. And he refers to Adam Smith, and he says that the Adam Smith told, he's the father of economics, as we know. Adam Smith told that the growth of industry depends upon the extent of the market. If the market is small, the growth, it hampers the growth of the industry. And therefore it's very important that the extent of the market should be extended. He says that de-urbanization is not good for the trade of a country, as big cities are the vast instruments. He says that in the small towns, and the small towns were getting destroyed because of the policies of the British Raj. Babasaheb Ambedkar says that de-urbanization is not good for the trade of a country, as big are the vast instruments. He says, what do the cities offer? Ready purchase and the sale of almost every kind of commodities in any quantity, because the market is huge. Accumulated capital, extended credit, and general information. Now, this is very important. The information is very critical to the growth in the economy. And there is a whole branch of information economics that has now emerged. Joseph Stiglitz, one of the great economists of our times, has also won a Nobel Prize in the information economics. If there is information disparity, it will always lead to the inefficient market. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that why cities are important because they are the big markets, and the big markets offer ready purchase and sale of almost every kind of commodities in any quantity. And then the capital gets accumulated in the big cities, and extended credit, the credits are available, and there is a general information spread across in the cities. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that there has to be the fair competition with foreign competitors, because the British, in the British Raj, it was completely against the Indian trade. They imposed heavy duties on the Indian products, and it was, it completely was destroying the Indian, trade and commerce and the industry. So Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the tariff regime of the British period was such that, 1 minute. The tariff regime of the British period was such that it led to a very unjust tariff. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that commercial tariffs must be based upon what is called a commodity competition, not on the political decisions. So when it came to the tariffication, when it came to the tariff, the British resorted to the political sort of the policy, and they gave the preferential treatment to the English goods, and it was not at all based on the very basic concept of commercial tariff, are based on what is called the commodity competition. It's based on the competition between the commodities, not based on the political decisions. So how and where is the expenditure distributed? Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the expenditure should be distributed to create the agencies of progress, because all the expenditure was going for the agencies of war, to maintain the military, to maintain the hold, the sway over the India. The expenditure was mostly spent on the war. So Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the agencies of progress are very important. There, the money should be spent. And while explaining what are the agencies of progress, education, public work, health, and infrastructure, these are the agencies of progress. So if the expenditure is not spent on the agencies of progress, but are spent elsewhere, then it doesn't create a good economy. So I think this is a very interesting findings of Babasaheb Ambedkar, which we can look into. And Babasaheb Ambedkar says that the sound system of finance needs good system of government. Very interesting idea. You cannot have a sound system of finance if you do not have the good system of government. And in 1920s, he came to the conclusion that democracy is the ultimate solution even for the economic development of the country. So he says the primary solution is that there should be an undivided government with a collective responsibility, because the governance was divided. He says that there should be undivided government with a collective responsibility. That can be achieved when the whole of government derives its mandate from the common source. So common source, of course, the people, and that can be only achieved only from the mandate of the common source. And this is a very pithy point to bear in mind. Hybrid executives, divided responsibilities, division of functions, and reservation of powers cannot make for a good system of government. That's what Babasaheb Ambedkar says. And he says that military force and moral force are the two chief means to political freedom, and a country which cannot generate the former must cultivate the latter. Thus, in India, the political problem is entirely a social problem, and a postponement of its solution virtually postpones the day when India can have a free government subject to the mandate of none but her own people. You see, we cannot encounter such a patriotic fervor in the leaders. Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar is an exceptional leader who had done so much to educate the people of India. He says that I am writing to educate the people of India. I want to, keep alive the interest of the people of India. You see, look at this statement. You see, the mandate of none but her own people. For in every country, there have been downtrodden communities suffering from social oppression and social injustice, and yet no country has had to be without political power on that account. And he says that America with her Negroes, blacks, and Japan with her Itas, Burakomins are in the possession of political power without having first destroyed their social inequality. It is due to the fact of their having in possession of military power. He says that in India, it's very important to apply the moral power to destroy the inequality. So, there is a lot in Babasaheb Ambedkar's books, and I will show you a little bit of that, so that you will begin to see how Babasaheb Ambedkar has studied the economy. Where is it? I think okay. I think you can see that in this volume number 6, and volume number 6 offers a very interesting way to look into the Indian economy. Is full of data, and you can see, if you begin to study it, you are going to derive a lot of knowledge from that. So I recommend all of you to go through that. So let's look at that. When Babasaheb Ambedkar, was drafting the Constitution of India, he has had he had all this experience of studying the Indian economy of the last 200 years. And we know that he wanted to become the finance minister of India, because he had so much knowledge about the finance, so much knowledge about the economy. But we know the politics, that he was shunned to the law minister. And Babasaheb Ambedkar always wanted to be a finance minister of India, so that he could help his country to develop further. And if he had become that, the picture would be totally different, because he was the man who knew so much. He had studied so much. None of the Indians had studied so much about the Indian economy the way Babasaheb Ambedkar had studied. And so he made the legal provisions in the Constitution of India for fiscal prudence. Of course, budget is a part of the Indian Constitution, Article 292, I think, annual financial statement, which Finance Commission as to how to distribute the revenues between the center and the states. Of course, CAG, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, according to Babasaheb Ambedkar, is the most important office in the country. And then there are the provisions for the financial emergencies, and it's a very interesting thing. Bear this in mind, because I'm going to come back to that at the end of my lecture today. And we know that there are fiscal policy instruments or tools that have to be looked into whenever we are looking at the national economy. What is the revenue deficit? What is the gross fiscal deficit and gross primary this thing? So budget, taxation, public expenditure, public revenue, public debt, and fiscal deficit. And Babasaheb Ambedkar touches upon all these points in his study of the Indian economy. He touches upon all these points. And to carry on the legacy of Babasaheb Ambedkar, particularly in this field of the fiscal governance, Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, which came in force in 2003. And in 2017, a committee was constituted, which was headed by N.K. Singh. And they produced a report in January 2017. And it says this. It says, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had said, "We hope that Parliament will take this matter seriously and keep on enacting laws so as to limit the borrowing authority of the Union. the government goes on frenzy borrowing from international market or even national market. Boss Ambedkar says that the parliament will have to take this matter seriously and keep on enacting laws so as to limit the borrowing authority of the union. I go further and say that I not only hope but expect that the parliament will discharge its duties under this article. And he says, and the report says, which was published on January 2017 to review the Fiscal Responsibility and the Budget Management Act of 2003. He says the enactment of this Debt and Fiscal Responsibility Act and the supporting legislative change can indeed achieve the fulfillment of Ambedkar's vision and commitment given during the debate in the Constituent Assembly. So the fiscal prudence, the fiscal responsibility is very important. And I'm going to show you some data to, understand what is the current state of affairs in our country. So the key points of FRBM Review Committee report, which was submitted in 2017, and its main objective was to review and suggest amendments to the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003. And Arvind Subramaniam has written a dissenting note in the report. He said that he doesn't agree with a lot of things. And I think that's how the things should proceed. And the key recommendation was this: the debt to GDP ratio of 38.7% for the central government and 20% for the state government combined. So that is what is to be the debt to GDP ratio. If we have to have the fiscal prudence or the fiscally responsible government, and the fiscal deficit, which I'm going to talk in the next session, which is a very key aspect of the session 3, the fiscal deficit target of 2.5% of the GDP. GDP is a gross domestic product. Of course, we even if we have some inkling of economy, we know what is GDP. And the committee recommended the establishment of an independent fiscal council and flexibility to deviate from the target in the extreme situation like war or natural disasters. So these were the recommendations of the committee, which was constituted in 2017, which says that we have to fulfill the vision of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. And this is what has happened. Okay, so there was a parliamentary question in 2013, 2023, December 23. This question was asked like last year and by Shri Sushil Kumar Singh. And he says, will the Minister of Finance be pleased to state whether the government has formed any committee to review the Fiscal Responsibility Act and Budget Management Act 2003? If so, the details thereof, along with the suggestion of the committee, whether there is a need to amend the said act, especially in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic. If so, the details thereof and the steps being taken by the government. Now, the government responded that yes, the committee was founded, and according to them, the FRBM Review Committee recommended the debt to GDP ratio of 60% of GDP for the general government by financial 23, consisting of 40% for central government, adopting the fiscal deficit as a key operational target. And as we know that the government has not accepted the recommendation of the committee as such, because the last point will suggest that the post-COVID-19, the central government announced a glide path of fiscal consolidation. God knows what is the glide path of the fiscal consolidation. And I think I will leave you with that question as to what constitute the gliding path to the consolidation of the fiscal consolidation. And I think that's a very interesting point. So before I stop here for today, I'm going to show you something which is, I think we all need to understand and bear in mind. This is the statement of fiscal policy as required under the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003, given by Minister of Finance, July 2024. And, she talks about how the macroeconomic framework statement and what is the You see, it further provides that central government shall endeavor to limit the general government debt to 60% of GDP and 40% of by 2025. We know that the government is not right on the target. The fiscal deficit is considered to be like 2.5%. It's 5.8%, and the government debt is very high. So, as we can see, the evolution of the budget statement from the earlier mercantile accounts to this. So this is how this sheet explains us the macroeconomics of India. We have to go into the depth of it, the taxation part of it, the direct taxes, the indirect taxes, the other sources of raising the funds, borrowing from the markets, borrowing from the private individuals, and how that amount is spent, and what is the status of the export and import, what is happening to the monetary policy, which I'm going to talk in the session 3, which is also very interesting because it's all about money. So you see, this is something which is very important. So what Babasaheb Ambedkar has studied and what Babasaheb Ambedkar has written has a tremendous value in understanding not only the Indian economy, but as to how the country can progress, how the country can develop with equity. And the theories that Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has produced has a bearing even today. And as I said that we have to study Babasaheb Ambedkar's writings, particularly economic writings, I think, without which we cannot serve the country. And I think it's imperative for the Ambedkarites today to go back to the economic writings of Babasaheb Ambedkar and derive the knowledge from it, so that we know what is happening in the economy today, whether the government is really practicing, in this case, the fiscal prudence. And please don't get daunted by these concepts and ideas. If any person with an average mind, if we start looking into books written by Babasaheb Ambedkar, it's not that he's not accessible. He's very much accessible. With little patience, with some application of mind, we can certainly understand a lot of concepts. And with the contemporary understanding, we can understand Babasaheb's vision of 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 India, particularly in terms of how the growth can be achieved, how the country can become more, responsible to its citizens. And we are going to see in the course of our sessions, forthcoming sessions, as to what Babasaheb Ambedkar conceptualized, how he conceptualized a lot of things, how he implemented when he had the power in his hand. And I think that's going to be a very interesting journey. Please do not worry about this topic. It's very complicated. It's not very easy to understand. And there is a lot more in the books than what I can introduce you today, because each book will take a lot of time to understand. But in these sessions, what I try to do is to give you general ideas about Babasaheb Ambedkar's economic philosophy, concepts, his insightful understanding, so that we begin to see how these writings are important, and how important it is not just for us but for all the Indians to go back to his economic writings, so that they can better serve their country in a manner that will make our country economic horse, powerhouse. So I think that's what I wanted to convey today, and I will stop here, and I will open up the class for any discussion or any comments.
Jai Bhim, sir. Prashant this side.
Yes, Prashant.
So I have a query. In the starting of the lecture, you said that Dr. Ambedkar wanted to make a jute industry which would be like operated by the workers, that will be controlled by the workers.
No. This is not. This is a trading business he wanted to do, and the mill he wanted to set up in Bombay, where the workers will have a share in the mill. So they are two different projects. Okay.
Okay. So his inclination was towards like social economy or like a mixed economy kind of a thing.
See, it's very difficult to say what was his philosophy, because he says that the economic policy depend on the time, place, and the situation. So he was a pragmatist at the core. So it is not that he was critical of capitalism, we know, He was critical of also Marxism, we know, and I'm going to look at that in the future sessions. But he was for the development. He knew that industries have a role to play, science has a role to play. There can be different way of organizing the businesses. Some of the industries can be best left to the state, and because the market is inefficient there, and in certain areas the government is inefficient. So now there are these concepts of the market efficiency and the government efficiency. The government cannot come in the day-to-day trading, right?
Right.
If the government enters into the day-to-day trading, it will create an inefficient market. But there are certain areas where the private parties can never come, like the railways. Who can manage? The railways has to be nationalized. That's what has happened in America, right? So these sectors, like for example, the roads, how a private party can venture into constructing the roads of throughout India, isn't it? So there are certain domains, and we are going to look into that is private to the state, and there are domains which are private to the private individuals, like the trade and commerce, right?
So more towards mixed economy kind of a thing.
Yeah, we can say mixed economy, but there are very clear-cut ways as to how Babasaheb Ambedkar has stipulated, recommended. For example, insurance. Babasaheb said that the insurance can never be privatized. It should be the duty of the government to insure all these citizens, because the premium, when the customers are paying the premium, and if it's lapsed, it goes in the pocket of the private individuals. So you see, there are a lot of these concepts, a lot of interesting ideas in Babasaheb's scheme of economic thinking. And agriculture, how this state should look into the agriculture, how there can be a state mechanism. State socialism, for example, is very beautiful concept. And so you can name it whatever, state mixed economy or whatever, but I think Babasaheb Ambedkar has a very unique way of dealing with the ideas.
So I think sector-wise, he had different philosophies for the
Yes,
kind of economy.
yes, it's sector wise.
Okay.
Like atomic energy can never be done by the private, right?
Private. Right. So one more question.
Yeah.
You shared the article of this fiscal glide path by the government. Now, according to that, the fiscal deficit needs to be reduced like on a gradual basis, year on year.
Yeah.
So we have seen that like fiscal deficit is the difference between the expenditure and the income,
Yeah.
and now it is negative for India currently.
It's always negative.
Yeah, it's always negative.
Yeah.
And we see that the majority of the income that comes for the government is like taxes and non-tax income.
Yeah.
So we have seen that only 2% or 3% of citizens of India pay taxes. So
You cannot, Prashant, you cannot say that. You are talking about the income tax, which came in the 1860s in India. We all pay the taxes.
right.
Okay, there are indirect
So,
taxes which you don't pay directly, but every single thing you buy, you pay the taxes. Every citizen is paying the tax. Okay.
But sir, do you think like the government's is it a government's failure to collect taxes because we are not able to match the fiscal deficit and income
There
and
are
expenditure?
many ways. There are many ways, about this fiscal deficit. There are, when it comes to monetary economics, you have these non-performing assets, the disbursement of the loans to the privates, inefficient handling of the taxation, and not creating the agencies of progress, as Babasaheb Ambedkar says, not spending money on education, health, and other sectors. So it is not that easy that government failed to collect taxes and all. It's very complicated. It goes to the philosophy of the governance. What is the ruling ideology of the government? Okay. So it's
Because if we
yeah,
see like the formula of GDP, it is C plus I plus G plus X minus M.
right.
C capital is capital income, I is investment income, G is government income,
Yeah.
and X minus M is export minus imports.
Right.
So what can be considered capital income? Like, is it private spending or does it come under government?
It's mostly private, and there are things like capital gain, and I don't think we have to go into those technical things like consumer price index and this and that. I think broadly, these are not the economic classes. Let me make it clear. What we are doing it here I encourage you to discuss in the groups all these conceptual things. Here we are focused on, how Babasaheb Ambedkar conceived about various ideas.
Correct, correct. I got carried
Okay.
away. Surely,
So
surely.
anyone?
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mangesh, sir.
Yeah, please.
This is Anurup. Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Hello.
Yes, AK.
Yeah. My question is, yeah, we can see today weaker section having very great deal of problem with their earning incomes. Income is shrinking nowadays, specifically in the platform economy. But what was the stand of Babasaheb Ambedkar on redistribution of total national wealth among weaker section, and how Indian state is acknowledging the need of that in today's time, because land and all those things are consolidated under few hands, and there is huge disparity among weaker section and upper caste in particular. So that disparity has forced these people to earn less income nowadays. So what would have been happen if gone for we had gone for redistribution of at least land for sake? Would
That's
that problem of inequality would have been acknowledged or underlined by state, or what was no dynamics of that
no, that's very true because
particular question of redistribution of total?
yeah. All the countries which are developed today, they had their land distribution. Okay, like Japan, America, wherever they are, they have always distributed land because land is not private to a class of people, right? Ultimately, the ownership of the land belongs to the state. So the land distribution was a great deal of a failure. And we know that the land, as you said, is consolidated in the hands of a few. That's why there is a big problem in the agriculture about the marginal farmers. But Babasaheb concept was very different. He wanted the state to own the land, make it into the large holdings, not small holdings, and give it to the people to till the land like tenants and have a parity in that, not just for one class of people, but have a parity in that, have equity in that. And that is a very important concept which nobody paid attention to. Had the attention been paid to that, as to how the government will, in Israel it is done, and such a developed country. So I think, yeah, you are right. The distribution of capital, the capital lies in the hands of a few. There are studies which shows that the only upper caste have the capital, then the scheduled caste, OBCs and STs, they do not have access to capital. It's very clear. They do not have access to the banking system. And there has to be equity in everything. Equity in taxation, equity in having access to the capital. And, there are ways to create that. And, but as we know that uh, the productive forces of the society are undermined all the time. And the government can get a lot of revenue if the society become efficient, because the caste system creates very inefficient economy. The if one is a true patriot or true Indians, they will completely try to do away with caste system, because the caste system hampers the growth of the country, economic development of the country. That's for sure. So what you said is a very valid thing, and Babasaheb Ambedkar always strove hard to create that kind of the level playing field. We can say in the today's parlance, and we are going to look into how Babasaheb Ambedkar was going to was talking about the welfare economy and the provisions that he wanted to bring in the constitution. But I think that's for the next sessions, right, AKG?
Yeah. I have one suggestion.
Yeah.
If you could cover one session about what would have been Ambedkarite perspective on techno-feudalism.
I think
Like,
you are the best man to do it. Okay, because I'm in the sixth session I'm concentrating on the basic Ambedkar economics, and it's a
yeah,
vast domain, as we have seen in the two sessions that it's a vast domain, and it needs a lot of
yeah, yeah,
time. But here my attempt is to
yeah.
keep your appetite and see the brilliance of Babasaheb Ambedkar and the importance of his economic writings. right?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Yes, thank you.
Yes. Anyone?
Good evening, sir.
Yes, Umesh.
Thanks a lot for putting so much light on the Ambedkar's economics. Uh, I just want to explore my understanding much more. Do we require history to be read in as read by Babasaheb to understand our people, to understand the economy?
Yes, why not? Because, as he said, that any analytical study must have a sound historical analysis. Because he uses a very important term, the presence of the past. So the past is not coming from nowhere. The present is not coming from nowhere. There is always the past in the present, right? So it's very important to study the past in order to arrive at understanding. So the historical analysis goes hand in hand with the analytical understanding, particularly in the domain, in the discipline like economics.
And now you have given the responsibility of all present in the group to deliver to the last man of the society to understand these things.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Okay. So anyone has this and has anything to say? Comment?
जय भीम सर।
जय भीम अनिल भाई.
सर आपने जो डॉक्टर बाबा साहेब अम्बेडकर जी के स्टॉक मार्केट के बारे में बताया है, तो
हाँ.
उसकी और अधिक जानकारी मिल पाएगी सर, कुछ किताबें वगैरह?
ज्यादा जानकारी तो नहीं है पर रेफरेंसेस है. और उस जमाने में ऐसा ट्रेंड था कि जो लोग कोलंबिया यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ते थे या बड़े बड़े इकोनॉमिस्ट थे, वो बड़ा
जी
उनका स्टॉक मार्केट स्टडी होता था, इंटरनेशनल ट्रेड का स्टडी होता था. तो दे वर बेस्ट गाइड्स. अगर बाबा साहब, इफ बाबा साहब वांटेड, he would have become a great investor, but because his caste was there, nobody came to him for consultation. He has to shut down his agency.
हाँ, यस सर, यस, राइट राइट। ओके, थैंक यू सर।
Okay, welcome. Anyone else? Or we will end the class session today if there is no comment or anybody has anything to say. Is that okay?
Sure, sir. One more request, sir.
Yeah.
Kindly open the group to share the views by the participants so that they can share and can contribute on the topic whatever the literature they are having.
So I
If
will make you an administrator, and somebody has to take the responsibility of managing the group, right?
yeah, sure, sir.
So
Sure,
if
sir.
they send unwanted things, you just
Yeah, unwanted thing will be thrown out. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So thank you
हेलो
so
सर,
much.
मंगेश सर एक
Yeah.
सर, आप जो अभी सेशन जो अटेंड कर रहे हैं ना, तो उनको सर्टिफिकेट मिलेगा सर?
देखते हैं, अभी मेरे पास तो कोई सर्टिफिकेट का है नहीं चीज, लेकिन लेट्स सी. ओके.
ओके, थैंक यू सर।
Okay, then see you next week with very interesting topic, and that is going to be of tremendous interest. So see you all. Jai Bhim and Namo Buddhaya.
जय भीम सर.
Namo